Okay, I'm preparing for a welding demo I'm going to be giving to the Northern California Art by Fire group on Wednesday evening. And we're going to let everyone that wants to go ahead and weld some things, some pieces of metal together and have a good time. This is going to be our practice piece. Right now it's kind of an old barbecue that I've taken apart and added some other parts to. And so I'm going to show them what acid, muriatic acid, which is swimming pool acid, can do to metal. The metal, right now this is just the natural rusting of metal, but a lot of metal steel is coated with this kind of oily sort of surface, and that's to help it retard rusting until nature takes its course. So this particular oily surface cannot be welded. Welding basically is taking two pieces of metal, heating them up until they melt, and where they melt together, they become one new piece of metal. It's as simple as that. So, pieces of metal that's been rusted in the acid. It's been sitting for about 10 minutes, and you can already see the difference. The side that was in the liquid is clean. This side is got the rusting on it still. So it's a really quick way to clean your metal and get it ready for welding. To clean off rust in preparation for welding is to use a grinder, like an angle iron grinder, or any kind of grinder like this. Home Depot has them, Harbor Freight has them for 15 bucks. And you can put different, they're not really blades, but they're discs. And the discs can do different things. This particular one is like heavy-duty sandpaper. It is literally going to sand the outer edge of this rusted metal off. It's going to be very, very loud. This not only takes the top layer off, it can also make cool textures. So it just depends on the type of disc you have, how smooth this is. But this is a really neat way to make a cool texture. So you can use this grinder for more than just welding, but making it a real art piece that is interesting and unusual. You see how the light hits it? It can really glint and gleam. This is what I like to do with my outdoor sculptures, so that the sun hitting this metal is going to really have some interesting effects all during the day, depending on how much sunlight there is. This is a different type of disc. It's called a flap disc, and you see it's kind of overlapping. This is much gentler and can actually make a softer, creamier pattern. This particular pad is a little bit old, but you can still see the difference between this and the first one we used. Hold your ears, here we go. Okay, so this is much smoother than the choppiness of this one. And again, if this flap disc were newer, it would really make a beautiful, creamy sort of pattern. But you can play around with the different discs and see what they do. One of the reasons I really like using the acid bath is because you heard and saw how long it took to make any impression on getting that rust off the surface. You will go through a lot of these discs, and it can start getting expensive. And with the acid, you simply dunk them in the bath, and then you can pull them out. And as I showed you, once you pull them out, it's perfectly clean. Very, very simple. It takes 10 to 20 minutes to eat through, if you will, the rust and the outer surface of that, that oily surface of the steel. And then it makes it just a dream to finish cleaning, getting it ready for welding. Another very useful disc is called a cutting blade. This cutting blade is very thin, and basically it's this edge that you're going to use to cut pieces off. And it's very, very effective, and as long as the metal you're cutting is pretty thin, it goes pretty easily. That's probably like a 1/16 of an inch. The gauge, I don't know, is probably 10 to 12 gauge. But anyway, so hold your ears again. Here we go. Okay, easy peasy. Now I'm doing all this one-handed, which of course isn't the most safe way to do it. But you saw how quick that went through, and this is what I use. I do not have what's called a plasma cutter, which some artists use to cut through pieces of metal. I wish I had one, kind of, but this works very well for me. Look back at this little table that we brushed some of this acid wash on, and you can see the difference. Wherever I brushed it is light. So this is the letter G. That's what I brushed into the rusted metal. All around that rusted center part, I did it so that when we have our little demo class, you guys are going to be able to more easily get that outer layer of oil off, and you're going to be able to weld things onto this table. And that's what our little fun demo is. Show you how much it got off. This metal that actually just looked like a gray piece of metal. But I'm, with gloved hands, going to take a cloth and rub all this off. Now look how black that is. This is what you would have to grind off using the grinder if you chose that method. And you can see how many grinder pads you would have to go through in order to clean off just this little bit. So that's why I really like this acid bath. An artist whom I met at a show a couple of years ago told me this secret, and it is fantastic. I've got 3 coats of the acid on there. I've wiped off all the excess yucky stuff, and now I've also put on a new flap disc, and so we're going to see what that does to this and how nice it will be. Hold on your ears. Here we go. A lot smoother. You can kind of see a little bit of the detail of the texture in there now. It's really quite satiny and beautiful. Hold your ears. I want to use this other disc too and show you the difference it will make. This is really loud. Phew. You can do a lot more, and it comes out much shinier once you've used that acid wash and you really got that outer layer of oil off. You will really save your disc if you do it this way with the acid. It's even been 10 minutes since they've been out of the water bath or out of the acid bath, and they were totally clean. And now look at the cool shapes they're assuming. Cool patterns. So if you don't like it, you grind it off and you start over again. These over here, those are also starting to assume the shape. You can see where there were stones, see there were little round areas where there were rocks underneath. And I don't know, I love it. I just think that's this is a propane torch. And if you apply this heat, this extreme heat, to this new metal, it can actually change it into rainbow type colors. And it approximates what you can achieve with welding also. And I personally like the look. People who are expert welders, they say, oh, that's because it's a heat signature. You should grind that off. An example of what heat can do. It will change this silver, solid silvery color, into these blues, light blues, dark blues. Some can be rust, some can be, I mean, it just does fabulous things. It takes a while to get it hot enough, but once it does, then the heat really works with this metal, and you see the colors that you're getting? And it's just so much fun. It takes a while to achieve it, but you can just get some fantastic looks, especially when you combine it with the natural rusting, as we're seeing right here. Once you've learned how to clean the metal, how to either grind off that outer layer or use acid to help clean it, you can also make different textures if you wish. So if you were to take perfectly clean metal, which would be very shiny silver, and clean it off with water, it would start rusting again. That's what this orangey stuff is. This is rust on pretty clean metal. The darker rust spots are ones that didn't come off in the acid wash, and which is fine with me. So you can actually have that. You can then take your grinder, and in this kind of spirally sort of curvy pattern with your grinder, you're just taking off that top layer of steel again and getting back to the silver. And that's what that silver line is. That's clean. Now, this particular piece used that technique of making a texture on the grass, laying the newly cleaned steel on the grass and letting it rust around it, and then using the grinder to make these really cool curvy lines through it. You can see how the sun catches. You can see the silver sometimes in those vertical lines. This was a way of using some, just like rusted out grids. I don't know how long this will actually last, but to help support this glass piece that you could use as a bird bath if you wanted to. And this is welded to rebar, which is one of my favorite things to use because rebar moves. It can actually dance in the wind. This rebar is very flexible, so if you have wind, it can actually move. This is another one of my favorite pieces, using some CDs with the welded. And then you can powder coat this metal, this steel, if you want to help to reduce the natural rusting. It will eventually rust, but it helps to reduce that. This was the first piece I did with my welder when I purchased it in May 2010, and it was just again to get an idea of what could I do to make something that would move. And she's got her fun little skirt back there, and yeah, so she's just looking at us. I was trying to experiment with little aluminum shavings and other things just to see what we could do with this cool welder. Probably the biggest hits are the garden stakes, using different pieces of metal, just putting them together and having a great time coming up with something unique. Later I then put some, let me see, yeah, let's get this way, some clay fish on the metal stakes. This demo, but this is the initial inspiration for my wanting to get involved with metal. My dad's second wife in the 1960s was buying this type of modern art, and she also was a clay person. She was a potter, taking classes at Sierra College, and I was so enthused and inspired by her that I always wanted to do clay and metal. So here we are.